Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and today we're going to be answering the question of what exactly the loudness stat does in Tarkov at the moment on suppressors. Recently I did a video on suppressor combos, primarily the 556 and the 762 versions, and I mentioned here that I was unsure of exactly what this number did, because I had not seen any specific tests and also not looked into it myself. However, since then, a fellow Tarkovian Dark Ally 123 was keen to get together to test this out to see if it did anything or not, because if it did, it could be an important component of the decision to use one suppressor over another. So we set out to answer the specific question, does the suppressor loudness stat do anything? The general idea was to use the 762 NATO suppressors, as these range from -35 on the SRD TI to -20 on the Daniel's Defense Wave. We also tried the Warden blast regulator, which has a loudness stat on it too, despite not being a suppressor. Surefire themselves say that it's engineered to direct the concussive blast of the fired round forward of the weapon system, so perhaps this is supposed to make it quieter for the shooter, but either way I have no idea how this is implemented in Tarkov, and I've had questions about it before, so it was worth throwing into the mix. We took all of these into raid along with an RFB and set to work, and yes, we did have to kill 2 players on the way. Killed him. In this setup, I was wearing a pair of Walker's Razor headphones, and using the rangefinder we set out a distance of just over 100 meters between our PMCs. Have a listen to these clips. We fired one at me directly and one away into the distance for each suppressor. We also got another couple of shots just for reference, one without ears and a few with the same suppressors but no environment sound of the bullet landing. In the first set of testing, we ended up showing a completely different result that I had forgotten was a feature of the game and has been proven elsewhere in the past, but nevertheless gave us another proof that over 100 meters, every suppressor that we tested anyway is inaudible. You do still firstly hear the rounds impacting onto objects nearby, and secondly the bullet crack from the supersonic rounds coming past, so you do still know that you're being shot at despite the fact that you can't hear their muzzle. On the shots away from the player, we hear a small audio report from the rounds hitting something on the map. You can see this in the imbalance of the audio towards the right ear, but as we said, no audible muzzle sound from the weapon at all. So although this is kind of interesting, it's not really what we set out to do. We got together to do some more testing. Unfortunately, it was raining, and despite sticking around for nearly the whole raid, it never died down. However, that doesn't really matter, because all we care about for the purposes of this experiment is the peak audio, which can be clearly heard over the sound of the weather. We went through the same series of suppressors and loudness ratings as you can hear here. You can analyze this in a few ways, but just putting the audio through Premiere Pro, which is the video editor that I use, was the easiest way for me. Here you get an audio readout showing the left and right channels measured in decibels. Decibels in this format are shown on a negative scale, with 0 at the top being the maximum level of the channel, so less negative numbers such as -20 are louder than more negative numbers like -40. Also, usefully, there is a peak indicator which holds the peak from the last second or so, which lets us measure the highest point easily for each suppressor. Measuring each of the peak audio amplitudes across the sound of the round firing shows that they are all very, very similar. Definitely not different enough for a modifier to account for a range of -20 to -35 from the stats. In-game, as you can hear yourself, it makes no perceptible difference from one suppressor to another, so that pretty much seals the deal that, right now, it does nothing. There was one weird result for the SRD, with the left channel playing much louder than the right, despite being straight ahead. Investigating this slightly, we can see that there was some sort of audio glitch which spiked the audio technically speaking, but to the listener it made no difference and the rest of the audio pattern is the same. As a small side tangent, I did notice something else whilst reviewing the footage. Maybe I'm interpreting this wrong, but to my mind you should hear the round impact and the bullet crack at the same time. However, what we hear is the impact first and then the bullet crack around 9 frames later, which is 0.15 seconds on 60 frames per second. The RFB with M80 fires at 802 meters per second with a hybrid 46 and loses around 11% of its velocity over 100 meters. This makes the average speed 759 meters per second, which allows us to calculate a travel distance of 114 meters to the target, which is the correct distance roughly. So it seems to me that the bullet crack is calculated somehow in relation to the original muzzle fire sound rather than its own unique sound produced by the round itself when in proximity with the target. That aside, we did also do some other informal testing with bullet cracks which, given we had some footage, I figured I may as well show you, although it's not part of what we set out to do or really conclusive. But I was interested to know how close you have to be to the round to get a crack from the bullet, and the answer seems like really quite close. Anywhere not right next to you and you typically won't hear it at all. Okay, that got the crack. I think it might have to be really quite close. I also brought an MP7 with subsonic rounds, and unfortunately I didn't bring any FMJ, so I couldn't explicitly show if there was a difference, but the lack of bullet crack on the subsonics tallies with other videos I've seen where you get a bullet whiz instead of a crack for these rounds. Yeah, I don't think you get a crack, you get a suppression effect, but you go a little further. Good to hear. Try again. Yeah, it's kind of hard to know. I don't think you get it doesn't sound like a bullet crack really. I have seen in multiple places, especially on Reddit, claiming that subsonic rounds don't sound any different to supersonic rounds, but I don't think this is necessarily true. I'd like to test this in future though, using both subsonic and supersonic in the same raid with the same gun, as well as the VSS to get a better idea of how this functions. On that note, I'm going to be doing more testing in general, so if there's anything that you can think of that you'd like to see, pop it down in the comments below and I'll keep a note of the ideas. I'm looking at improving my testing methods as well, so expect more of this type of video in the future. So as usual, a big shout out to all my patrons. Thank you guys for all your support so far, it really means the world to me, and if you guys aren't on Patreon, then go and check it out, you might find something there that you like. That aside, if you learned something, please consider dropping a like and a comment on the video. To see when I'm streaming, you can follow me on Twitter and Twitch. Check out our ScavTalk podcast in the links below, and with all that said, I'll see you next time, and as always, have fun in your raids.